So this panel, I believe it's Enabling Identity for All, is really to build upon what this last panel, what you heard from the last panel around policy enablement and the great work that's going on around the world with identity and enabling services. And this panel here is made up of mobile operators, technology providers, GSMA, and so we're going to dive into more of the technology deployment and specific issues around interoperability and really kind of boots on the ground of a perspective. So we have the same amount of time as the last panel. We'll end around noon to allow for questions. And there's a mic right in the center of the room. If you have a question, just go ahead and queue up behind the microphone, and we'll address those. So to begin with, I'm Ray Kimble, president of Kuma. We're a small business based in Virginia that focuses on privacy and security services and helping organizations go to market with their identity solutions. Serge, if you want to do a quick introduction of yourself.
Yes, Serge Llorente. So I'm working at Orange, the operator. So we're covering something like 30 countries, but mostly, if not only, in Europe and Africa. And I'm responsible for Mobile Connect. So I don't know if you know about the concept, but it's about authenticating on the phone.
Okay, so let's see this work. So Marta, Ienco, I work for the GSMA. Kyla was on the previous panel. So the GSMA is the Mobile Trade Association. We represent the interests of the operators worldwide. We have a broad variety of operators that are working with us on the issue of identity. And we're looking at identity on different perspectives. So one is the areas of a digital identity for development and how we can use and enhance mobile platforms to deliver identity services to those that lack of identity or those that need to verify and use existing identities. But we also have a program, which is the program that I work for, which is focused on technology and the deployment of technology, and helping the operators to understand what are the enablers and opportunities, and working in particular since 2014 on a consistent framework for identity management systems, which is called Mobile Connect, which is what Serge just mentioned. And it's trying to really foster deployment on a technical level of identity over the mobile. And Serge will talk more about Mobile Connect, but I think what is relevant within this purpose of this conversation is that is responding to the demands of regulators, but also to the demands of the markets and the different technologies that are arising within the people around the table really here. So yeah. Long introduction, perhaps.
Oh, that was good. It was good. But I heard nothing about Italy there, so maybe some Italian stories too, no?
Yeah, about my identity, right? Yes, correct.
Hi, I'm Charlie Walton. I'm from Saffron Identity and Security. Saffron, as you might know, is a large industrial company, does aircraft engines and all sorts of big systems, a bit like GE. Identity and security is probably one of the least known and largest identity companies on the planet. So we've provided plumbing and infrastructure for biometric enrollment systems, for passport, ID cards, voting systems. In the US, our subsidiary called Morpho Trust provides state driver's licenses for 40 of the 50 states. And we're largely focused on helping both national and international based infrastructure develop for identity, both physical identity and now in terms of digital identity. And that is really all about the life cycle issuance, the management, the consumption, and the tools that people need to really manage their identity. So that's our company, Ray.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So some of the topics that we're going to hit on here are, one, just starting off as far as, what are some of the key services that this great panel has either participated in deployments or has witnessed to kind of move identity forward to help the people that don't necessarily have identity or can't prove their identity. The other topic we're going to hit on is some specific positive considerations and components of deploying identity systems in developing countries. And then as well as the third topic is around the challenges. And I heard, I don't know if the lady is still in the room, she asked a question toward the end of that last panel, what are the specific challenges that we're seeing with the 1.1 to 1.3 billion users that can't assert their identity? How do we cross that last mile and address them? And I think we have an outstanding representation from an operator, from an interoperable kind of agency, if you will, with GSMA from a policy regulatory standpoint, and then also from an enrollment standpoint with Saffron. So to start off, what are some of these key services that you've all witnessed or have had a role in deploying? And we didn't talk about who went first, so.
You'd like me to start it?
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe to begin, at the end of the day, we can kind of take a look at digital identity in many markets generically as a way, a vehicle for us to interact with government. So government's obviously very important. Banking's very important. Healthcare and increasingly e-health, e-prescription, very important. Sharing economy type applications are very, very important, and we can kind of go on and on. We'll find that in not too many years, most of what we do we'll tend to be doing remote with the mobile. The mobile becomes very, very centric to that. We get into the developing country challenge, and we begin to find a set of very, very basic things that we might take for granted here in the States. And I think there, Ray, we talked a little this morning about the case in Kenya, where we were involved in really doing a voting system. So a kind of a roll-up voting system where what we did was we provided the kit for biometric enrollment of Kenya's citizens at stations, 30,000 stations across the country. We provided the training for the operators to do that, and it was basically a biometric enrollment. And that really became the start. Equivalently in Ivory Coast, we had done a system that was a combo voter registration, a voter card, and actually a national ID card that began to be bound together. So what we've tended to find in these places is that a starting point, it's not the only one, but a starting point can become just the inclusion of people in the vote, right? It is a very basic societal function. And so it was a biometric registry, and then the ball got rolling from there.
Makes sense. Yeah. Serge?
Yes, I totally agree with Charles. I think there is something that seems more and more obvious, is that the only thing that is with us at any time is the mobile phone. And when it comes to mobile phone, it comes also to something that is the key to open all the doors, digital doors, etc. So the identity and the way to authenticate, etc. We do think, we operators, but not only operators, as a citizen, there is only one object for which I will step back to my home if I forget it, is my mobile phone. And the truth is that in many countries where citizens don't have IDs, plastic cards, etc., they all have a mobile phone or a feature phone. And even in Western countries, there are more and more reflections to replace the plastic cards by certificates and information that will be embedded within the mobile phone. So the mobile phone is truly the object that is going to become our identity, our way to consume services. And when I say consume, it's not only a matter of spending money, but what you want to get access to your government, to do things that are sensitive for your everyday life. So we have to put the identity into the phone. This is something that seems pretty obvious to all of us. And this is the topic of Mobile Connect, and the reason why more than 50 operators today are involved in Mobile Connect, because we all have this feeling that this is the way to do it, and the way to solve this problem for every citizen in the world. You were mentioning the 1.5 billion people that are still missing identity. Once again, they all do have a feature phone at least, and to us, we believe this is the way to provide identity to everyone.
Thanks, Serge. We heard Mobile Connect referenced a couple times. Marta, you know Mobile Connect well?
Yeah, no, I mean, I can provide a little bit of context and background of what is Mobile Connect and why the GSMA is involved in pushing, operators to adopt this as a consistent framework to provide identity services over the mobile. So the idea first started when the GSMA, together with the leading mobile operators and Orange, has been since then always the leading examples about how to develop and deploy identity services over the mobile, is to define a set of consistent APIs that could actually enable the use of identity over a number of services. So essentially, there are Mobile Connect is a framework that is provided by the operators community to the service provider, and is really much driven by the demand of service provider, whether those are governments, whether those are retailers, whether they're coming from the commerce sector. The importance of the way we have designed such APIs is to respond to a number of fundamental principles. The first one is to have a federated framework for identity. The second one is to have a technology architecture which is actually flexible to meet the demand of such service providers. And thirdly, but not least, I think is also the outspoken focus that we put on privacy. So we have, together with the operators, designed some privacy principles in order to really make sure that the users are in control of their data. And when we talk about consent, we are talking about meaningful consent, and we are talking about something which is at least compliant with regulatory requirements across the world where those requirements are existent. And also that's why when we're talking about critical services, we tend to look at identity in a very broad sense. So we're talking about identity in terms of how that can enable a digital transformation. So whether it is to help governments to enhance the delivery of public services and therefore reduce transaction costs, both to the benefits of governments and the citizens, that actually need to get access to subsidies. So whether those are the people entitled to get those subsidies provided by the government. And the second dimension is also around privacy, as I was saying. So how we can respond to the challenge coming from the internet to the identity theft and of misuse of identity. And within the context of sustainable development, I think it's becoming very clear that one of the purposes of the mobile operator is also to help the ecosystem players in providing identification for all. This is, as we see it, is actually how to provide an entitlement to a service. So it's a really holistic way of looking at identity, really, and promoting the role of operators in this space.
Yeah, and on that point, the role of operators and also of the biometric enrollment. For those of us that have maybe products or solutions in the audience, are looking at some of the 1.1 billion and looking for ways to help provide identity to them, or even here in the U.S. How can their relationship with the mobile operator enhance their product and their solutions, and how could, let's say, the enrollment process or being lightweight around biometrics also play a factor? So if you all could just share some maybe experiences around that or thoughts on how to be a better partner.
So, this is for sure a bit of a journey as we think about it, as the 1.1 or 1.2 have, they're starting at zero, right? No paper, no birth certificate, no nothing, and you're trying to go from there up. And what's tending to be a dominant case in developing countries is this notion of I show up and there's my biometric, and I'm able to sort out duplicates, and I'm able to get a registry going. And from there, I think it's all about then linking that with the mobile, because the mobile at the end of the day is how I'm going to transact. It's going to be much less so the face-to-face as it's going to be the mobile, right? And that begins to really open things up. So the biometric technology and its enrollment is of course very important. And then the binding of that, the registered identity with the mobile phone, so that I can then transact. So in my view, those are the two key things. As you start going along the curve, let's not forget, any one-point technology or any one-point technique will be beaten. It will fail. And this is all about setting a collage and a risk management engine to ultimately conclude on ID, and to as well set policy in place so there's appropriate balance between security and privacy. One of the least interesting things to happen would be to say, gee, we've got a wonderful a biometric database established, and then an oppressive government taking advantage of that.
Yeah, yeah. And Serge, the role of mobile writers, I mean, some of the benefit, I guess, that you guys see in bringing the market in the different, the multiple regions that you guys are involved with right now.
So yes, obviously, we provide a network that gives you the ability to authenticate at wherever you are, or at least at nearly wherever you are. What Marta mentioned is very true and very important, is when it comes, and Charles as well, when it comes to privacy, because the system by design is so that you don't unveil your personal information. So for the first time, you have the ability to authenticate without unveiling your information. We all know that there are a lot of existing solutions that are very convenient, but the price to pay is very high. I remember what Edward Snowden mentioned this morning. It's very important to keep the control of your information. So this is our aim is also to provide confidence so that our customers and the citizens are confident into the authentication method that they use, because they know that their privacy will be protected. So we provide a network, obviously, because this is something that we do for ages, but also with this new mean of authentication, the privacy, because we know that this is the challenge for the future. Once again, it was very true what Edward Snowden said this morning. We don't have to privilege the security over the privacy, and this is what we aim at providing, both security and privacy.
Thanks. Marta, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I think, of course, the role of technology is fundamental for identity, but I think, one should not underestimate, and maybe it's also within the role that I cover within the GSMA, but it was also mentioned several times, is the role of regulation, and how an enabling framework, a smart enabling framework for identity, could actually foster the development of identity enrollment at national level. So, there are no shortage of examples around the world of how national governments are actually pulling together identity schemes which enable citizens and users to provide access to services provided, whether they are provided by the government institutions or whether they are provided by the private sector. But what I think is a common theme is that those frameworks have a legal recognition which is defined within a regulatory framework, which provide an entitlement to, whether it's the government or whether it's a private sector providers, to provide identity to the citizens, and hence provide control, and hence allow users and citizens to have control to those means. But there are several also institutions that are looking at how these can be, these frameworks can be actually designed, or vice versa, how identity management system can be designed, and what are the regulatory frameworks that should enable the design of this system. So the World Bank is doing some great progress in that respect with the principle of education for development. This has been established has been endorsed by several organizations, including the GSMA and other 18. But I think there are also broader there are also, so those are really the high-level perspective. At the lower level, I think it's also important to identify what are the key elements of the regulation. So what does it mean, for example, to be compliance with security requirements, how to ensure terms of equivalence, for example, in terms of level of assurance, and what are the legal implications as well of legal implications of level of assurance. So what are the legal effects in practice of level of assurance? And there are other and several dimensions that can be considered and need to be considered.
Okay, thanks. This last question before we open it up to the audience for questions. How's this? That's better. And Marta, you just hit on regulatory framework, global interoperability. What are we've done a lot of, over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of conversations around frameworks, regulatory compliance, the need for those. The panel just before us addressed that. There's also a tremendous amount of technology out in the space today. So we still have the 1.1 billion users that need to, or people that need to address things to be able to assert their identity. So what are those? Maybe each of you could speak to one what you think is a critical roadblock or hindrance in deploying an identity solution in an area like that. And I don't know if you want to start out, Marta, if it's for you the regulatory framework, or what other ideas are.
Thanks. So yes, I think just to build on what I was saying, I think the regulation, the importance of regulation under different dimension is really important. So it is with regards to defining, common frameworks and understanding about the security requirements, whether they are level of assurance, whether it's about the legal implication of the level of assurance, but also on top of that, how do we ensure interoperability and mutual recognition across different regions and different states that get an entitlement to provide identification. So this is just like first thought.
Yeah. Charlie, do you want to?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with the point. I would say that in some environments you're just struggling with the basics, right? There's no money, and some of these systems are going to cost. And you take a look at the model. If any of you are familiar with the Nigerian ID card, right? So we had a MasterCard step up and say, listen, we're willing to invest in helping to pay for the card. In exchange for the benefit of having access to these customers in time. So we ended up having a situation where government either chose to not pay or could not afford to pay, and actually went to private sector. So I think sorting out money is a very important base point. The other is, I would say in my past year traveling around the world a bit, finding very, very different cultural views and cultural expectations regarding this topic, and of course the balance of privacy and security. Many countries in Latin America have biometric registries, and if you take a look at the U.S. and the U.K., you'd be kind of like, no way, right? This is not going to occur here, and so that this balance, and I think part of what Marta mentions with respect to regulatory and the overall policy framework is really pretty key. I've recently seen a case, in fact, was in our office in Santiago, Chile last week, and discovered, okay, this is a fairly developed market and a good base of core ID at a government level, but you have a situation where this combo of government, citizen, and bank don't trust one another, right? So where the notion of government, bank, and telco being very, very critical to rolling out ID, you had some communities that didn't trust one another or have that respect. You've got other markets that are very government-driven, top-down. You got places in Africa where it's all being driven by M&O, and they're very, very prominent and should take a responsibility to try to drive this out. And the last thing I guess I'd mention is just to emphasize this point, this interconnection between biometric enrollment to kind of get the basics done, but the use environment is all about the mobile phone, and that becomes very key, and the stuff Serge has mentioned about Mobile Connect, I think, is really key.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Serge, thoughts on challenges from an operator perspective?
So as mentioned by Marta, what the nice thing is that what we call Mobile Connect is a standard, so it's a multi-menu standard. It couldn't work in other way, because when you try to push a product that is just specific to you, no one wants it. So it's a standard, so it's the beauty of the thing. Now the challenge is to convince more and more service providers to adopt Mobile Connect. And we do believe that eGov is really the best use case because it talks to every of us. And once again, I said this morning, the need to come from the citizen. So we need to be able to go and consume public services without being forced to queue, for instance, during hours, etc. So there is really an existing pain. You have to get to a desk, to queue, etc. If you can do it without being forced to do all these antique operations that we were used to do until now, then it's a gain of time. It's also a gain of money for the government. So when Charlie was saying that sometimes governments or actors on the markets, etc., don't want to pay, on the other side, they know exactly what it costs today to have people being forced to be behind desk, to receive people, to force people to wait for hours, to do things that are not really funny to do. So there is for governments, they perfectly know that they can save a lot of money by digitalizing the whole process. For us as citizens, it's a win-win situation, of course. And then we do believe that by doing eGov use cases first, there are two advantages. First, we enroll massive number of customers because another challenge when it comes to digital identity is the enrollment. It's shorter than queuing hours behind a desk, but still, if you have to spend 5 minutes or even 3 minutes enrolling your identity when you want to do an on-the-fly operation, it's still too long. So if you enroll for a use case that avoids you waiting for hours, then you do it even if it lasts 5 minutes. So government use cases will help us enrolling massively people. And the other very positive thing with treating with governments first is that obviously governments want it absolutely safe. So they ask their experts to look at the solutions. And when the government experts say it's okay, it's safe enough, it means that you're ready to sell it to any other merchant side bank or whatsoever. Because when a government says it's safe enough, then it's safe enough for everybody. So this is the approach that we have, at least at Orange, is trying to cover eGov use cases. So we have this something very advanced with French government, with Polish government as well, and more governments because of the initiative at European level that by 2018, European governments will have to have means to authenticate digitally their citizens so that every citizen in Europe will be able to consume any service in any other country. So this is a challenge that all governments are. We on our side are more than happy to provide the solution. So it's a win-win situation. And this is why eGov use cases, to me, so probably not only in Europe, are the nicest use cases to push identity solutions.
All right. Well, thank you. So that brings us to 12:02. I do want to open it up for questions from the audience. You have access to a mobile operator that's been very involved in deploying identity services, as well as GSMA from the policy side, and Saffron from an enrollment standpoint. Patrick, if you don't mind jumping behind that mic there, that'd be great.
Up to here, but I'm with the Wireless Registry. So the questions on Mobile Connect, can you talk about some of what makes the technical implementation of Mobile Connect specific to the carrier community, and why wouldn't there be other technologies that could provide that same level of authentication? So that would be the first part of my question. The second part of my question is Mobile Connect a GSMA initiative such that in Poland or in other countries where it actually has been deployed, you have to get all the other operators involved, or is it something that as one particular carrier you can implement?
Okay, so to your first question, I think it's not absolutely said that we're working only with the mobile operators to the benefit of the mobile operators. The way we have established Mobile Connect community is led as a front end sort of views from the mobile operators, but we're working on existing standards, like for example the OpenID Connect, which enable access, and it's used by huge number of technologies, and uses different profiles for different service providers, whether they are financial sector or whether they are government sector or whether they are different needs. But it's also true that Mobile Connect is working with different organizations, like for example FIDO Alliance, to provide different authentication service. So we have a very open framework and a very open set of organizations that we work with We also work with Google. We work with many companies, and we are just trying to make a consistent framework for the mobile operators using available technologies. And then your second point was around...
is it multiple operators in a given market?
Yeah, I think the commercial framework, and how operators are working together. So Mobile Connect, the APIs have been technically enabled around 51 countries, by 51 operators in 29 countries, providing access to 3 billion customers as technically enabled. The commercial framework and the extent to which Mobile Connect is actually used and deployed by the service providers is different country by country. So, for example, in Orange and in France, and Serge could talk you more about how this works. There are different sort of agreements across operators, whether they're part of a joint ventures, whether they are actually acting independently to the service providers. So it's not a one-fits-all approach.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have anything to add to that, or?
No, I would just emphasize on the fact that between MNOs we really work together. Maybe for one time we're not competitors. We all know that it will be a success if we work together. So we share our experience. We more than often we go and try to convince prospects together to tell them this is not the Orange product or whatsoever product, but it's the operator products for the customers, for the citizens. So it's really an approach on which through the GSMA we meet very often between all operators, so that to push together this concept.
I would just add, I believe that even in the United States, that's the norm, is that the operators do see this as an opportunity to really engage with everybody, and to do so jointly seems to be the preferred method. Hi.
Hi. I have a question, Liz Vota from Bank of America. We've talked a lot about the technology. We've talked a lot about the different sources of the data, whether it's the mobile network operator or the government, et cetera. What about from a consumer perspective, since this concept of, moving the identity into these various factions has been tried for many years now, and there's been sort of adoption issues, at least in the United States, certainly looking at eGov and things like that. Are you seeing some sort of research from your customers, from the mobile network operator customers, that says that consumers are really primed and ready for this concept now versus in the past? And I'll sit down for the rest of it.
No, thank you for the question. It's a great question. Just wondering who wants to address it first.
So willingness to jump from the existing authentication method to this one, that's the question? Sorry to make you walk again.
Yeah. Consumer adoption. Yeah.
So no more in terms of the consumer adoption of this concept of somebody other than, let's say, like, instead of using your bank to sign in, you use your mobile network operator, or instead of using your government ID, you use your mobile network operator as your identity source. Is that something that you all have seen a trend from consumers are ready for that? Because we've seen in the past that when consumers were given the option, since citizens, at least in the U.S., to do that with various government agencies, that the adoption was fairly low. And if the premise is that service providers would invest or would allow this to happen, I would assume there would need to be an assumption of adoption in order to make it worthwhile.
Okay,
so
I
understand.
I'm just
curious what has brought this to this point now that you're seeing as a trend from a consumer perspective.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you're right. It's never easy, such transitions. The fact is that today, so if we're speaking about banks or merchants or whatsoever, we have some numbers we have to manage. Sometimes it's something like more than 25 passwords and IDs, etc. So this is the pain that we're faced today. And even if, so banks, for instance, of course, they are they're willing to push their own apps because they manage the whole stuff. They're able to provide all the services through the app. But a bank app is another ID password. So you have to manage another ID password on top of merchant size, governments, or whatsoever. And the aim is not to replace the existing system, is to provide a new authentication method. Somehow is to avoid the convenience of dealing with the password, so that to lean on a standard, but it doesn't mean that the authentication cannot be made within your user journey. It means that, for instance, there is a mobile connect button that is defined already. The user journey is that you click on mobile connect, you authenticate with the code that you have, but this is one-on-one only code or biometric or whatever the partners. For every time you can find the mobile connect button, you can authenticate the same way, and it doesn't mean that it destroys the value of what have been created. Now, it's true that we're at the beginning of the adventure, so somehow, because what the operators are really doing a huge effort to implement the infrastructure. Now the next challenge and the upcoming challenge, and we're really on it, is convincing the service provider more and more to adopt the system. This is why I was mentioning that eGov could be a good way, so that customers and citizens are getting used to this system, and that somehow they demand it on every of their services later on, saying, now I'm used to this service, it is convenient, why couldn't get it for my bank, etc. And I don't think that, so by doing so, the aim is that the demand comes from the customer. So I do agree it's a challenge, and you're perfectly right, it's a massive transition, and it won't be easy. But on the other hand, first, the inconvenience of having to deal with so many passwords, and secondly, the security issues that it causes, because we all know that there are databases that are hacked every day, and when it comes to banks, when people attack the emails and so on, it's not for reading my conversation with my wife or whatsoever, it's to get my bank account passwords, numbers, etc. And we as operator, we suffer from this, as well as you banks. So I think this is once again a win-win by providing an authentication that will be universal, safe, but keeping the existing user journeys, for instance, the one of the banks that are very cool. This will make a better world. But as you say, once again, I'm not saying it will be easy, but we need to convince.
I would just maybe add to that. GSMA has done a study around consumer use and adoption, and they actually did one focused here in the U.S. in the past year. So we can connect with you and share that with you as well. You are seeing this password fatigue from consumers, and the uptake on federated identity solutions and credentials, and asserting your identity through a trusted provider like an MNO or like your financial institution is becoming more relevant and more prevalent. And so there are some numbers out there that we can share.
Hi, my name is Amy Paul from the Global Development Lab. I had two questions that are kind of more, we've talked a lot about mobile authentication that are kind of more on the enrollment side for problems that we may see more for people who don't have official documents. And I'm wondering if, in your experience, you've seen cases for people who may have a feature phone and a phone number but not official ID documents. If something like a mobile ID would ever be recognized, like are there examples where that's moved through and said, I've started with a mobile ID number as my only source of ID and moved into something that is more tied to services? Or for people who share SIM cards or share phone numbers, how do these solutions work for them if they may lack their unique ID?
Thanks for that question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so thanks for the great question. I think as my colleague from the previous panel highlighted, I think there are great examples where the operators are helping, the governments to actually provide services for birth certification, for example. So it is not really in terms of providing a unique identity as you were thinking, but it's more about in terms of providing the data that enable the child that is born to receive a birth certificate. So essentially, it happens on a future phone, so on a GSMA, simple for GSM feature network, and essentially registered over and send the SMS data to an SMS gateway to the operators, and the operators send it back to the central authorities, to the central database provided by the governments, which then authorize the register to provide to issue a birth certificate to the child. So this is a first step. If we're thinking about the use of attributes for as identifiers to provide a unique identity to a citizen of developing countries, I think this can be more complex and something to be thought more carefully. I don't know whether there are examples out there. It's something certainly that we can wish for, how we can use network the data that are available to mobile operators to help in addressing the identity gap, but I don't think there is something that is happening. So we can certainly help in the value chain of identity management, but not necessarily in the enrollment, where I see the enrollment and the of identity as a mean of identification more of a role of a government to provide access and entitlement to a right to for identity. And I think just going back to the research point, I think the password fatigue that Ray just said, is very prominent and something that is shared amongst all the research that we conducted across the world, is that really we are responding to the risk of privacy which are out there, and therefore consumers are increasingly desperate to have a more convenient medium to have a strong customer authentication. So Mobile Connect, and what we are talking about really is also to focus on services that are enabled by identity. So whether those are, for example, authentication services on a stronger level, whether we are talking about authorization, so providing consent to get access to a service, or whether we are talking about attribute sharing in different forms. So we are sort of talking of product as service enablers, so identity as a service, and this is how we work.
Excellent. We are at 12:15. I don't want to cut questions off too quick. Do we have one more, or are we ready for lunch? We're ready for lunch. All right. Thanks a lot, and I appreciate the time of the panel. Thanks.